and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excuse me.
Now call this meeting of the Fairfield Town Council to order. First order of business is public announcements. Details may be found at www.fairfieldme.com. Absentee voting is October 7th through October 31st. The 2020 dog licensing tags will be available at the town office on October 16th. Current 2019 dog licenses expire on December 31st. The Lawrence Public Library will be hosting their annual Halloween event at 33 Lawrence Avenue on Thursday, October 31st from 6 to 8 p.m. Second order of business is public hearings. The first public hearing is to hear from the public on a proposed revision to the General Assistance Ordinance. I now declare this public hearing open. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the council on this issue? Seeing none, this public hearing is closed. Third order of business, public comments. Members of the public may speak to the council on any item or reserve the right to speak on a specific item that is on the meeting agenda when the item is addressed. Does any member of the public wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to the fourth order of business, reports from staff and committees. And we'll begin with the town manager report.
So, on September 12th, I attended the Sustainment Maine Coalition meeting. The organization has been reviewing its mission statement and discussing its future. Also, following that meeting, I did meet with Bob Gashlin from US Cellular to sign all of the leases for the cell tower piece behind Public Works, so that has been done. On September 18th, I attended the Central Bank Growth Council Board of Directors meeting. We received updates on the foreign trade zone and new applications for that zone. That zone has actually gotten to the point where now it is financially independent, so we are receiving enough funds that it pays for itself. There were many years ago where municipalities were asked to contribute, so that's doing really well. Also, some success, there was quite a bit of success on multiple past press releases regarding member community projects and also various other project updates on the region. The 19th of September was the KRDA Executive Board meeting. The KRDA recently sent a survey to all the businesses in the park asking them about what services they would like to see in relation to new businesses coming into the park. And from that, they were able to determine that the park currently employs, within the entire park, over 1,000 people, with roughly about 850 of those jobs going through T-Mobile. So it's actually quite a few people do work in that park. Some project updates for you with the passage of the school budget on September 12th. This year's tax commitment was done on the 13th. The mill rate was reduced a half a mil to 22.3, which is the first mill rate reduction in the last 10 years. The town of Fairfield and Waterville's closed landfill project for solar was featured in Oakland's article that was out this week about them putting solar on their closed landfill, so if you can see that. There were some mistakes in the original version of the article that was posted. I've contacted them and they're doing those corrections. Also this week, Waterville IT did provide me a list of computers that are currently operating under Windows 7 operating system. If you're not aware, Microsoft, as of January 2020, will no longer support Windows 7. So the department heads and I are working on a replacement and upgrade program. Many of our machines might not be as susceptible to upgrade as we would like. They're more than 5 years old and may not run with the new operating system very well, so we're working on all of that. That more than likely is going to come back to you because it's probably going to require capital reserve fund purchase because it's across all the multiple departments. But we are hoping, because this affects multiple towns that Waterville IT works for, with a group purchase we'll get a reduced rate. So we are working on all of that. And then also the town's attorney, code enforcement officer, the fire chief, and myself will be returning to court Monday morning in regards to the Robert Dale case. And that's it for me.
Thank you. Now an election report from the town clerk.
So voter turnout for the evening hours that we held on September 5th was 0. Of the 4,317 registered voters, 221 cast ballots for a turnout of 5.11%. So it was exceptionally low once again. 12 absentee ballots were requested and cast, and on election day, there were 3 voter registration updates, 0 spoiled ballots. Deputy registrars Andrea Weber and Sheila Patel commenced election day training at the voter registration post, which included registration changes, card filing, and inactive file rotation. And they also shadowed the other various polling place stations. And Deputy Andrea Weber and election clerk Robert Cezak commenced training as deputy wardens to either assist or cover when we have other wardens not available. And then the other various on-the-job training was facilitated, as always, throughout the day. And every town department contributes assistance during elections, and it was well done by all. I appreciate all the help.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other committees that wish to report at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to the 5th order of business, the consent agenda. These items are considered routine or standard business and therefore will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests prior to consideration of this portion of the agenda, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered sequentially on the agenda. Is there a motion to take up the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. And that goes immediately to a vote. All in favor of the consent agenda? Any opposed? Any abstaining? The consent agenda carries. We'll now move on to the 6th order of business. Take action on the following items of business. Item 19-97, order that the town council hereby adopts the general assistance ordinance as amended.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second, and I have a question for the town clerk. Is this our annual sort of housekeeping update to our general assistance ordinance?
It is. So every year for October 1st, we get the updates for the new rates set by the state for Somerset County. And/or any other state set fees or policies. And in this particular case, you are updating the appendices A through F and H. And it's routine annual updates.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? That motion carries. Moves us on to the, we'll go with 7th order of business. Council workshop and other business. Number 1, to discuss proposed revisions to the town council policy, Article 2, Section 210. I will recognize the town manager to give us an overview of the proposed changes.
So this is the purchasing bids and proposal section of administrative policies. You were provided in your packet a copy of the policy with the full markup, and then also a copy, it has draft down the middle of it, that is clean with all of the changes. Some of these pieces were just general overall flow of the policy, bringing it up to date. But some of the major changes are changes in the amounts in which require coming to council. This policy hadn't been reviewed for aesthetics regarding numbers since at least 2017. And not even then, because I was here then and I know we didn't. But originally, there were various provisions starting as low as $500 and how bids needed to work. And with the changes in the economy and the changes of just the simple cost of things, we've put that up and increased those numbers. One, we used to bring anything that was over $5,000 to council. This change actually puts it to $10,000. It requires different wording for bids and when verbal bids were required and when they're not required. We continue always to look for the cheapest price on everything. Oftentimes, even when things are in the $200 range, we still get multiple requests for prices because we're constantly looking for the best price. The other piece that this does is it adds to a different section in the reserve account purchases. Any purchase from the reserve account, no matter how small, had to come to the town council for approval. What this does is it puts it in line with all purchases so that I would be responsible for all purchases, regardless whether it's reserve account or not, if they're less than $10,000. However, if a purchase was to come from a capital reserve account at the following meeting, you would receive a fully updated detailing of that purchase and why we purchased it and which account was used, so to still keep you in the loop. And we're actually working towards a process in which now you currently receive monthly expense detail and those sort of things anyway with the purchases that we make throughout the course of the month when you get the warrant. We're also going to be working on making sure you get a revenue and a capital reserve account detail as well, just to give you some additional pieces. And then this also defines a capital reserve account. So in here it says, capital reserve account funds are typically to be used for expenses totaling $5,000 or more and for items with a 5-year or more useful life. That definition does not exist in any document that we have anywhere. So this will actually help us classify what capital funds should actually be used for too. There's a little bit tighter rein on that, and we're really making sure we're not using capital reserve funds for operational pieces.
I do have a question on the section on bidding. Under statement of purpose for bids, the second paragraph, which looks like it's been pretty much added wholesale into here, says quotes shall be sought by at least 3 eligible providers if available. Then the next sentence says for purchases between 2,000 and 5,000, these may be verbal, and then above 5,000, it's in writing. Is it the intent that this policy doesn't apply to purchases that are less than $2,000, or is there a third type of bidding that we're contemplating for very small purchases?
It is the intent that this does not apply to purchases smaller than 2,000, because that is exactly the way that it is written. And that's just a number that we went with, knowing that it would more than likely be subject to discussion. It increased, put this together so long ago, so I apologize. Because that entire section is brand new. There were purchases between, it originally read between 500 and 2,500. So we removed the 5, but put it at 2.
I don't have any objection to the actual content of it. I just think the first sentence should clarify that quotes shall be sought by at least 3 eligible providers if available for purchases of $2,000 or more. Because as written, it doesn't actually define when this kicks in.
So take the period out and lowercase the 4.
Well, I think that makes that sentence
Yes.
cumbersome.
Well.
I think you just need an additional parameter at the end of the first sentence to say that it applies to purchases of $2,000 or more.
Okay. I see what you're saying. Yep. And then the other stipulations. Gotcha. Yep. That works.
In general, I obviously understand the desire to move these numbers up to match the sort of modern economy and inflation and other pressures since we originally put this policy into place. One thing I was wondering is, since $10,000 is significantly more than $5,000 in terms of what can be purchased and sort of what level of thing can come into existence for the town at $10,000 a pop, is there some sort of reasonable aggregate limit over, say, a month or a quarter or something that could serve as a check on, not necessarily you, but a future manager deciding, hey, I have discretion to spend as much money as I want at $10,000 at a time?
Right. I don't know how that would be worded, because right now, one could make the argument that I have as much authority to do it with anything that's less than $5,000. So we do the same exact thing.
But the things that you can buy for $5,000 are significantly
That is true.
less of a sort of investment. It would take you longer, and you'd have to buy a lot more smaller things for that to happen. I mean, $10,000, you could buy a cheap car.
I don't know of a parameter that wouldn't get you into, so if you think about the fact that in a warrant, and technically all so I'm thinking, okay, so an additional report if X number of dollars was spent throughout the course of the month, but then if you think about the warrant, I mean, a month ago you had a warrant that was over $1 million. I mean, so warrants can get to be, we spent quite a bit of money throughout the course of a month. I don't really know how you could do something like that, because I see where you're coming from.
Or even just a requirement that, even if it wasn't, a report that you sit down at a council meeting and whatnot, just once you reach a certain cap for the month, you notify the council that you've reached that cap. Keep spending, but it would at least give the council, the ability to say, hey, we want to call a special meeting or deal with this this spending issue if it's getting out of control. Something that doesn't tie your hands and make you unable to act, but certainly keeps the council in the loop that
Right.
Tens of thousands of dollars are
going through. So,
in a short period of
I'll
time.
do that. So I'm trying to think, it's not very often that one could make the argument that every penny that we spend, I actually ultimately approve. But I don't actually really spend money, you know what I mean? So it's because it's fed by all the various different departments. So would there be a way to do a checks and balance that, so I think about the fact of purchases over $10,000. Well, you could max that out in 2 deliveries of salt. You know what I mean? So, and that's a contracted service. Yeah, I don't know what the answer to that is, but if you give me a little bit of time to think about it, then maybe we can come up with something for you and then know that we can bring this back to your next meeting. If we're fine with everything else, bring back the suggestions to the next meeting, and we just wouldn't put this on the consent agenda piece and know that we could discuss it then.
I mean, or if in the meantime,
Come up with something
come
and
up with
send it
something,
out.
we can
Send it out and see what
send it out and
Yep.
send out a proposal, or nobody objects to
I
it,
get that.
we can
Yeah.
move it on. I mean, I'm not worried that you personally are going to abuse this power. I just think that the
But-
jump from 5,000 to 10,000 opens up a very different world of what we are authorizing, the town manager
Right.
as an office to do.
And I completely understand that, and you should never write your policy for the people that are currently in the middle of it, so it should always be done for the future, so, yeah, let's see what we can figure out, and I'll put my head to it and then ask around too, so there's gotta be something out there that exists that gives a good defined parameter as to how we could do that, so, because that's the reason why too, we put in the capital reserve piece, because I don't want to have the ability to be able to go out and just spend capital reserve funds at $10,000 a whack and nobody knows that, so, but I get the other piece with the general fund, how do you keep that sort of thing in check? Or rationalize it so that it falls in line with everything that we're currently doing, so, okay.
Right.
Yep. Other than that, are there any other questions?
I think so.
Seeing no further discussion on that, we'll move on to discuss RFP and investments. And I think I can preface this by saying I think we have all noticed that our investments, and they're currently being held by Bar Harbor Savings and Trust, have not performed to the sort of satisfaction of the public, and certainly not to the levels that we had been hoping at the time that we engaged them on this. And then it was recently in the newspaper that the bank itself is in a bit of a scandal over there, who they have allowed to manage some of their funds recently. So I think at this time, it's been something that I've been talking to the town manager about for a while, is what we're locked into with respect to Bar Harbor Savings and Trust. And the recent press coverage of their personnel issue has certainly spurred at least one member of the public to get in touch to say that they're not comfortable with the money remaining there. And I think it's a good kick to get us to look at this issue again. So, Michelle, would you like to give any further information?
Just so that everyone is aware, our current contract actually with Bar Harbor Trust Services has actually lapsed. They're still administering it like it was still in effect, but we wouldn't be violating any contractual obligations that we're aware of. The original contract was for 3 years, with 2 additional 1-year each renewals. I've never signed a renewal since I've been here, and the original contract was done in 2015, I think, so we're well beyond our 3-year contract. Our funds have increased some, but even the most recent August 2019 investment piece, they're not following the percentages as we have in our policy. It's not off by much, but it is still off. And yes, this has been a conversation we have had for a while, specifically, and it comes up every spring when we look at the Crawford Fund, because it is managed as a part of this money. And making sure that our Crawford Fund is in something stable, that even if it makes a smaller amount of money constantly is better than having the ups and downs that we've had in the last several years, where 1 year it makes 24,000 and the next year it's actually in the whole 11,000. So to create continuity and stability for the recipients of the Crawford Fund, that will be a better part of our goal. So that's going to be part of our conversations with the fund administrator for whoever is new in that interview process. So there are quite a few things that we're thinking about that we want to work with and do differently going forward.
I would point out, since the Crawford Fund is usually our most public discussion on the issue of the town's investments, according to the Crawford Fund policy that has been in place for some time now, we were unable to even consider a disbursement of the Crawford Fund this year in keeping with the policy because there was no profit to disperse. So at this point, there's not, granted, some of that is not specific to Bar Harbor Savings Trust. A market crash in December was not
not conducive.
Not conducive to that, since we used December 31st as the deadline to evaluate that. But nonetheless, we had even I'd asked the town manager to produce numbers with respect to approximately in April with respect to any sort of recovery on that fund, and it was still unable to justifiably
recover
disperse.
because everything had recovered.
Yeah, everything else had recovered. Our funds had not, and I think that drives home the importance of looking at a more stable.
Well, I think it's a matter of putting it out
program.
to doing the same thing we did before, putting it out to a competition and see what we can come up with from the different financial institutions around.
And I'm also going to look into some sort of way in which, one of the things that always frustrates me is that regardless at the end of the day, and it's not just Bar Harbor, it's with other investment corporations, is that if we don't make money, I don't think they should make money. And how we can tie some sort of that monthly maintenance fee to what our funds are actually doing, because it just doesn't seem fair to me that an organization is still going to make multiple thousands of dollars a month when we make nothing.
That's right.
So, and that's a piece that will actually probably be changed in this bid proposal, because it's not currently in there.
Yep.
But we're looking at adjusting that before this goes out. And then this bid proposal was put together quite quickly for you with estimated dates. So you'll see it looks like it's going to run its course through October. Come back, bids would be received in November. Well, actually, the end of October, in November, somewhere in there, and looking to have the investments changed out probably by late December. I looked the last time when we switched investment firms, and it still took like a month and a half after the award was given for the conversion to actually take place.
That's
so
correct.
The goal is to try to get it for some time in the first part of 2020. So
2002.
20. Corrected myself.
Anyone else want to discuss discuss anything further on the RFP, proposed RFP for investments?
So I'm gonna go ahead and get this together. We'll get this out as soon as we can.
Excellent.
And what we'll do is we'll collect as many names as we possibly can to firms and direct mail, but then we'll still also advertise and we keep a list and that sort of stuff. Okay.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right, that leaves us with item number 3 to discuss other council business. Mr. Lawrence?
Good evening. Everyone knows the weather's changing and things like that, and the town is finishing on projects. I just want the residents just be advised that the town's finishing up, and just if you they stop and just thank them for trying to keep the town up and going.
Thank you. Mr. Bashadi?
No, I'm good right now.
Handler?
Nothing for me tonight.
Ms. Busk?
No, not me either.
I just wanted to say that hearing the election report and some of the previous reports and observing the attendance at town meeting, I really want to encourage people to attend public meetings and come and vote for things. I hear when I talk to people about people really want to feel like they're being heard on issues regarding the budget, especially, and what affects their taxes. You have those opportunities, but you have to come and vote and participate.
Yeah.
You can't be heard and also stay silent. That won't work. The home rule in Maine is a practice of very local, very involved democracy, and if people are not willing to come and be involved, it's not going to keep working that way. So I would really encourage people to come out and vote. There's an election in November. It's an off year, but there are 2 council seats and a number of school board seats that are open, and it's very important that people's voices be heard. So I really want to encourage everyone to come out and vote. That's all I have. With that, the next regular meeting of the town council will be on Wednesday, October 9th, 2019. At this time, the council will recess and sign all documents that require the signature of council members. Do I have a motion for recess?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. If there is no objection, we are recessed.